Hi, and welcome to this special edition of the Ginghamsburg podcast. I'm your host, Rusty Eshelman, and I hope today's episode helps you live the Jesus life. On Saturday, May 25th, 2019, the KKK-affiliated Honorable Sacred Knights of Indiana are going to hold a rally on Courthouse Square in downtown Dayton. Now, this group has been deemed a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And as an alternative to either participation with the group or violent protest against the group, Ginghamsburg Church is partnering with several community organizations and churches to host an afternoon of love, unity, peace, and inclusion during the rally. And today, we get to hear from two leaders who serve on the Ginghamsburg Church team. Rachel Billups is senior pastor of Ginghamsburg Church, and Marcy Walker is the connections coordinator at our Fort McKinley location and has been helping plan the Afternoon of Love. Rachel, Marcy, thanks so much for sitting down today and sharing a bit of your story. Marcy, first, tell us a little bit about your role at Fort McKinley, what it means that you help connect with the community, and how you got involved in this event.
Yes. So my job as a connections coordinator is to connect the church with the community and the community to the life of the church. And so I help coordinate a lot of the activities that we have going on at the Dayton and Trotwood campuses. So we were actually in a planning meeting for the Dayton campus, and Pastor John had brought up the event that was going on the 25th and his concern for wanting to have an alternative to this event. And so we got together, started brainstorming ideas, and came up with an idea to have a day of Love Your Neighbor Day.
Yeah.
And so we had originally booked Island Park to have a cookout where we have games and live entertainment to just bring the community together, no matter what your background, race, sexual orientation, nothing. It didn't even matter, to just be able to love on each other and just celebrate each other that day. Well, during that process, Mayor Nan Whaley had a meeting where she called a lot of the community leaders together to talk about what was going on the 25th and discuss some alternatives. So as a community, we brainstormed some alternatives. And on that day, I found out that the NAACP was having a meeting, or had already planned an event, the Love, Peace, Unity, and Inclusion event. And so rather than having competing events, I said, hey, we should just go ahead and team up together. And so there's several other organizations who thought the same thing. So that's how we got involved.
That's excellent. Who are some of the other partners are that are joining in?
Yes, there's some other churches. There are not just Christian churches. There's other churches from other religions. There are the Filipino dance group is going to be there. We have some different women's groups that are going to be there. Just a bunch of different community groups from all over the YWCA that are coming together to help pull this thing off.
That's awesome. That's very cool. And the event takes place where again?
McIntosh Park, which is on Salem, off of Salem, which is on Riverview.
Sure.
Goes into Edwin C. Moses. So it'll be in that area. A lot of downtown will be blocked off that day. So there will be drop-off locations there and parking close to it.
Okay, very cool. We're excited about the event. Do you have any idea why this group decided to gather in Dayton? And any of the conversations, does that come up? Why they're actually from Indiana? I mean, why Dayton? Why the Courthouse Square?
From conversation, we heard that there are some ties here in our community to this group, and so they wanted to recruit more people for their group. So they're coming here to recruit.
Okay, so this is a recruiting mission.
Yes.
You know what's interesting? I was reading an article from WOSU, and they were saying that this. Now, I followed the Facebook link, and it said the link was broken. So I don't know how valid it is, but they were reporting that this group calls themselves a nonprofit, a Christian nonprofit group on their Facebook page. But the Southern Poverty Law Center has deemed them a hate group. And what you've learned is that they're here to recruit.
Yes.
Okay, fascinating. Fascinating stuff. You mentioned that a lot of the streets are going to be blocked off, and there's kind of managing traffic and public safety. What is the feeling in the city right now? As you've been going to meetings and these kind of things. What's the feeling? How's the mayor feeling? How are law enforcement feeling? Residents, business owners. Can you speak to that at all? What you're hearing?
There's a huge concern for safety, which is why a lot of the roads will be blocked off. They're just trying to plan for that. They don't want any anything happening that may have happened in other cities in the past. Law enforcement is also heightened that day. Several businesses actually decided to close that day. So it's actually costing the city of Dayton a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, we're not happy about that. And we're not happy that they decide to come here. There's several people who are very fearful, others who are downright angry. And then some actually they're feeling bothered. So it's a mixture of emotions going on.
Yeah. Some of my reading and what kind of just hearing the buzz around town and whatnot, some people are nervous to even show up, for an event like this. Actually, I believe public officials have advised people to not come to the rally itself, even to protest that, this is happening away from the actual rally, right? The event that we're partnering with.
Yes, this event is away. And actually, we want to encourage people to stay away from the rally as well.
Yeah.
I feel like people showing up to the rally, although I know your intentions are good, I feel like that's adding fuel to their fire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They want us to come down and start wreaking havoc. They want us to cry out and be upset. That's giving them what they need in order to be powerful and have power and have a voice. But if nobody shows up and nobody's there causing a commotion, they don't have an audience.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah. So what this event, in some part, the one that's being held at McIntosh Park, is to draw attention away from the rally itself, and hey, let's focus on these values of love and peace and unity instead.
Absolutely. So this is across the bridge, on the other side of the bridge.
Yeah.
And so rather, now we could just say, everybody ignore it, stay away from it, and just stay home that day. But we're like, this is a great opportunity to show the community who we are, how diverse we are, how loving and unified we are, and show that we know what inclusion is. We know what diversity is. So it really just gave us a day where we can hopefully annually, this is the day where we can love on each other and we can celebrate who we are as the city of Dayton.
So in this group's attempt to create a rally for hate, they may have catalyzed a movement of love.
Absolutely. That's our hope.
Among people.
That's our hope.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty cool. Rachel, as the senior pastor here at Ginghamsburg, for about a month now, right?
Yeah.
You've been here for a long time, but serving in that new role. Talk about why you're so supportive of this event in particular and this kind of activity.
I think it's one thing to talk about inclusion. It's one thing to talk about our desire for diversity. It's another thing to actually practice, to actually put a little sweat equity in and get our feet moving in this direction. And so I think this is just a great opportunity. And I think the event is so welcoming that even folks who might feel a little like apprehension, like, oh, am I invited to that? Yes, you are invited. Absolutely. Right? All of us need to be a part of an event like this because as people, as Christians, we claim that we love Jesus and we love other people. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. This is what it means to love your neighbor, to show up and show that support and to love folk.
Absolutely.
That's cool. As a church, we've said that we exist to help people, live like Jesus. I think we say that we exist to make disciples of Jesus for the transformation of the world. In some ways, we're deducing that down now to basically say to live the Jesus life,
That's
to live like Jesus, that our lives and our community's lives would look like Jesus. One of the things that Jesus is commended as saying is that we're to love our enemies and not just those who agree with us or look like us. This kind of an event creates some tension in that space. When we're standing against hate or standing against white supremacy specifically, how do we walk the thin line of loving our enemies, loving people who we maybe vehemently disagree with, at the same time standing for the values of Jesus himself?
I think a lot of times we think of ourselves, I think it's really easy to other these folks who are gathering, to say, well, we're against those people. Actually, we're not against those people. We're against the principalities and the dark powers of the world that are shaping those folks. And so I think when you start like breaking down the reality that what shapes their understanding is what I would call a false understanding of Scripture, a false understanding of what it means to follow Jesus, a false understanding of, and some of the brokenness of our own systems. Our systems are broken, and to actually recognize that what forms a hate group like this is not necessarily, oh, these people are terrible. No, they're beloved sons and daughters of the living God, but their actions, their behavior, what they're doing, that's what's sin, frankly. It's not just terrible, it's sin. And so we've got to call it what it is and be honest about what they're doing.
Yeah. So figuring out how to not stand against people,
right,
but to stand against what did you say? The powers and the principalities.
Yeah.
What's that? That's a passage of scripture
Yeah, it
that
is.
I should know. But what is it again?
Paul said that, right? And so I think it's really important to make that distinction, because in the same way that we don't want to be othered. We don't want our brothers and sisters to be othered. We don't want to other these folks either, because making people the other is a slippery slope. Yeah.
So that's interesting, because so you host a prayer time
Yes.
each morning on your Facebook page, and you pray for people. I could imagine I'm hearing you now praying for our sisters and brothers, who have been converted into a destructive way of thinking, yet are still beloved children of God. I can hear you, praying.
It's interesting. Lately, I've been praying a lot for worldwide leaders. There's just some evil things that are happening throughout our globe. And I was just watching a documentary of some things that are happening, like in the Philippines and other places, and just really broke my heart. And instead of like praying against that human being or against particular leaders, I began praying against things like the myth of scarcity. I began saying, okay, God, we need you to help us understand that you're a God of abundance, and that your abundance exists everywhere, and not to use human beings as commodities, but rather to see people as people, right? That's what
Yes.
Fort McKinley, the point, that's what we say all the time, to see people as people. And I think the more that we see people as people and not a commodity, oh my goodness, the more that we recognize folks' belovedness, the more that we can experience that unity, that love, that inclusion, that peace that we so desperately want to experience on Saturday afternoon. Yeah.
What's fascinating is we live in such a polarized world. I don't think that's surprising. I think we would generally agree with that. It's so easy to tip someone off, and there's a lot of extremism in some ways. But it's easy it'd be easy to pray against someone or to hate someone, and in some ways that's even could be cool or whatever. But you're talking about kind of a third way, a way that sees the value, the inherent value of a person as a child of God, distinguishing between that person and their value system, and then figuring out how to be in a relationship with them. That's kind of a third way that this church has desired to live out. How successfully, who knows? But we'll see someday, right? But can you talk about that third way a little bit? What does it mean to not be either or, but somehow reach from both sides?
Yeah, figuring out what it means. And, I think sometimes when we talk about this, people are like, oh, that's just wishy-washy. You need to stand for or against something. But I think it's really, really important for us to recognize it's not about standing for or against. I think we live in a culture where we're obsessed with being right. And in reality, what we're talking about is being in relationship with God and other people. And when we're in relationship with God or other people, we have no choice. If we truly have given our lives over to God, we have no choice but to love our enemy. If we're living the Jesus life, we have to love our enemy. That doesn't mean we don't denounce and reject the evil and the hate that they're proclaiming. I want to make that clear distinction, but rather say what you're doing, your actions, your choices, we're against that. But who you are, God has claimed you, and let me not other you, because God has claimed you. And let me pray that you will be converted, frankly. Mm-hmm. Let me pray that you will see the light. Let me pray that God will move. We have so many historic examples of how God moves in people's lives, and they go from hatred to love.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I remember reading a book by John Perkins where he and Tom something or other, but where Tom was a police officer who abused John Perkins, an African American man, in his role as a police officer, and somehow through a miraculous work of God, they became partners in ministry later in life and had this incredible healing reconciliation. Which we love stories like that. They're difficult to actually live out in real life, but they do exist. Rachel, you're a white American woman. Marcy, you're an African American woman. What do you feel like is at stake for you personally this weekend? You can both answer that. And what do you feel like is at stake for our community?
I'll let you go first.
What's interesting to me, some of what I think is really, really important, I guess what I recognize as being even a white woman, I recognize that I have some privilege that maybe other folks don't have. And it's an opportunity for me to listen and to love, to not be in I shouldn't say I have nothing to do with this, but to really say there's an entire community, a powerful community within the Miami Valley that is leading us to action. And so in some ways, I think this is an opportunity for me to say, you know what, I'm going to be led. I'm going to be led by some other folks. So that's what I see. I also am not only a white woman, but I'm a mama of these 4 children. And I want them to understand what it means, like, to be in relationship with people who don't live in the same place they live, who don't go to the same schools they go to, who maybe not have the same experience that they have, but rather what it means to be like kingdom kids, right?
Right.
They need to know what it means when we say we follow Jesus. That has more than just coming to church kind of implications on our lives.
I really feel like showing who Christ is at stake. If we say that we are trying to show the love of Christ, and especially if they're saying that they're a Christian group, we want to show them what true followers of Christ look like this weekend. And I believe that's his namesake is at stake. And so I believe that light is going to overshadow darkness this weekend, and for his namesake. And also, I want to show my kids something different. My kids have been freaking out from everything they've heard at school ever since they heard about it. They're like, Mommy, we can't go downtown. Mommy, even down to, we can't go to this event that you guys are putting on because it's too close. And I'm like, we do not live in the spirit of fear. And so I'm believing God for protection. So peace and safety is also at stake, but also progression is at stake. I believe that now, because let's be clear, let's be honest, we still are a long way from where we need to be to really have inclusion, not just in the United States, but even in this community. So I believe that this is a step forward. This is a step towards progressing to inclusion. So all of that is at stake for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
So
that's
to our
good.
listeners, if you're wondering what's at stake, why it's worth coming out, the name of Christ you named, progress itself in the reconciliation. I think you're talking about it and what it means to be an inclusive, reconciled community.
Yes.
What else did you say? You said our peace and safety are at stake this weekend. You shared about our kids having a different kind of picture, hanging out with people that may or may not have a similar story or background from them. So if you're listening and you're wondering why it's worth being a part of this, I think our guests have just made some really profound points about why we should do this. I did want to ask, and you've already kind of tapped on it with those answers, but why can't, some people are saying it's not going to be safe. We shouldn't do this. Ginghamsburg is actually encouraging people. Marcy, Rachel, you're encouraging people to do this. Why can we not do this, right? Why do we have to? Why not just say, oh, let them do their thing, and they'll quiet down later? Why do we have to do something?
Again, we could say, hey, what we're going to do is just let them do their thing. Everybody stay away. They'll go home, this, that, and the other. But we want to prove a point. Again, we want to show the love of Christ. We want to show who we are as a diverse community, as a loving community, and we want to show that step towards inclusion. And I want to show something different for our children, and not just for the people in this city, but for the people around the globe.
So a lot at stake. Would you have anything to add to that, Rachel? Why do we need to do something? Why is it not enough to just phone it in? You know what I mean?
Right. I think it's going to be tempting on a Memorial Day weekend where you might have family plans and there's a barbecue and you're thinking, well, I've got this and that to do, or your kids are in softball or soccer or whatever that might be. But I think there is a huge temptation in our culture to be lulled into complacency. And the truth of the matter is, we might not think like, oh, I'm not going to show up to that rally, therefore I'm against it. The one downtown by the KKK. But here's the deal. When we don't show up to these moments of inclusion, when we don't show up to these moments where we can be in support of folks around us, then in some ways we are contributing.
Absolutely.
In some ways, we're complacently saying, hey, that's okay.
Mhm.
And that's not okay. As followers of Jesus, as people who are, if we're going to be the light of Christ, we have to get off our tails and actually make it to Macintosh Park, because to not do so is to say, hey, it's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
Rachel, I want to take just a bit of a turn here and broaden the conversation just for a few minutes. We don't have a lot of time left, but this week you were at an event talking about inclusion of another kind, and I'll just put a little ... here. We've been using that word inclusion. I think I'm even learning how unhelpful that word can be, because it assumes that I'm including you into my thing, and it can even be oppressive. So the language is always changing. We're always learning new things. So grace, please, from our listeners for as we still continue to grow. But you were learning about kind of a bigger container, right? Race and issues of hate and white supremacy aren't the only ways that people are marginalized. And you were at an event this weekend. Can you share for our listeners just a tidbit of what you were learning?
So I was at this event called UMC Next. It was a gathering of 600 what are known as centrists and progressives. Centrists are those folks who kind of look at, and we were talking primarily about LGBTQAI relationships, kind of this conversation in the wider church world. But the reality, we are also talking about race. We were also talking about gender. So really this entire, what I'm beginning to call a theology of welcome, really is a bigger conversation, because in some ways it's all tied together. Our desire sometimes as human beings to exclude the other, right? And what was fascinating, so a group of centrists, let me say what that is again. Centrist folks kind of see both the traditional and kind of more progressive side of things, and want to kind of hold people together, invite all kinds of people at the table. And then progressive folks are a bit more progressive, as you will, in this conversation. And it was a pretty fascinating experience for me. I found myself doing a lot more listening than talking. That's probably a good thing.
Not a bad thing, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good thing for us to do, a lot more listening than talking.
Mm-hmm.
I got to be honest, there were moments that I was like really uncomfortable, because I'm a person that considers myself a centrist. And so I kind of see where people are coming from multiple kind of streams of thought. But at the same time, there were folks who were much more progressive than I could ever imagine being. And so that really pushed me to really think about how unwelcomed sometimes people feel. Yes. And the truth of the matter is, I've had moments, and I'm sure our listeners have had moments where they felt unwelcomed, but this is different. Rejected because of your identity, rejected because of the color of your skin. I can't say that I've had those particular experiences. And so that's why I say I was doing a lot of listening. I also think it's events like this that challenge our entire movement as a church to really begin seeing like, hey, maybe my experience is not the only experience in the world. And maybe, just maybe, if I slow down long enough, because we are busy people, if I slow down long enough and listen to the story of my brother or sister, I might not just learn something, I might be transformed by it. And so this is an invitation into a different way of living, and a different way of listening, a different way of being. And that doesn't mean, particularly when I'm talking to LGBTQAI, I'm not asking people to give up what they believe. I'm asking people to enter the conversation. And I hope you can hear the distinction. Enter the conversation, because I don't want us to talk at each other or past each other. I want us to talk with one another. And I think that's very different.
Yeah, thanks for sharing some of that. You again, kind of broadening that conversation. It includes more people in the important conversation that we're having today. And it also makes me think about how this event this weekend, Marcy, you talked about how we hope this is a catalyst for more. In some ways, it's kind of sexy to like, we stood against the KKK, right? It's kind of a no-brainer. You're kind of a turd if you don't, right? You know what I mean? Like you don't, it's,
right.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't, you're not that awesome for standing against the KKK. Like in this day and age, like, of course we will. But there's work to be done after this weekend, right?
Hard work.
Yeah, hard work. Can you speak to what should people? So the weekend's over, and and we've done incredible. Like, it's been good, right? And hopefully it gives birth to something annual or that kind of thing. But between now and this day next year, what's the work that people need to be doing to not let it die?
Yes. So we need to keep this same energy that we have going into this event, moving forward past this event, not just into next year, but on after that. So us as a body of Christ, what I challenge us to do is take a snapshot of where we are, an honest snapshot. Are we showing a face of peace, unity, love, and inclusion? And if not, if the answer is no, then what steps need to be taken in order for us to move in that direction? And we need to implement it immediately.
We can't wait.
No.
We can't wait till...
And it can't die down. We have to keep that energy up.
Yeah. Any practical ways that you would give for people to continue that journey? Maybe especially for, you talked about how complacency is so easy. Like, what are some things that we can do practically in our lives to keep that going?
Absolutely. Open up your table. Like, even at home, open up your table to someone who doesn't look like you, who doesn't believe to you, what you believe. Even with leadership, I know I feel like in my life I've always been that token Black girl. Which, there's benefits to it, but at the same time, I want more of us to have that leadership position. So open up even our leadership table to more people who don't look like you. Yeah. And so that's some of the first steps that need to happen, because how do you know how better to include and to move towards inclusion, or whatever term we want to use, if they're not included? Yeah. If we don't have a voice, if they don't represent a voice. Yeah. So.
Okay. That's awesome. Well, that's certainly a growing edge for us in our church, and we're trying to lean hard into that. We're grateful for you being a part of our team,
and it's my pleasure to be a part.
Being a voice at the table for sure. Before we wrap everything up, remind us one more time where the event is and what time it is, and how people can find out more if they'd like to do that. Could you do that, Marcy?
So the event is this Saturday, May the 25th. There'll be a pre-event from noon to 1 where there'll be line dancing, bucket drumming, food trucks. And then the actual event will be from 1 to 3 p.m. And there will be parking at the Dayton Cultural Center and drop-off locations at Orth and Riverview Terrace. So come on out.
Awesome.
And bring your chairs so you can have somewhere to sit, and bring snacks or bring money for the food trucks.
Okay. Excellent. Well, hey, I want to say thank you so much for sitting down and sharing today. I think our listeners are going to learn some cool things from your conversation. I'm really grateful for it. So thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
To stay in touch with all that's happening at Ginghamsburg, download the Ginghamsburg app, follow us on social, subscribe to our message podcast, or go over to ginghamsburg.org and find a location near you. Thanks for tuning in. Today's episode was produced by Dan Bracken, myself. Special thanks to our guests, Rachel Billups and Marcy Walker, as well as our production crew, Will Flora, Tavion the intern, and Chris Wingfield.